Welcome to the Mango Effect podcast, where every week we talk about the path to living a limitless life and having the freedom to do it your way. No topics are off limits. We get into the practical, the hypothetical, and the downright juicy stuff. I'm Mindy Rosser, your host and lifestyle cheerleader, and I'm here today to talk about the power of creating your ideal workspace, especially if you work from home or you can design your own office. So have you thought about what it takes for you to be productive? A lot of times we think about diet, we think about exercise, we think about all of the other things, but what we do often overlook is our workspace. And is it conducive to the type of work that we're doing? So as someone who has worked from a home office for more than a decade, I know, I feel old, right? I've learned what works for me and what doesn't based on the types of projects that I do. So I look at the space I have available. I try to figure out what makes me the most happy. There are a lot of different elements, and we'll get into them today, because if you are thinking about creating your workspace, or maybe you are considering leaving your job, or you're trying to start a side hustle, you're trying to carve out a space wherever you live. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, but you're trying to create a space that will actually help you to do the work that you want to do in the way that you want to do it and be the best environment for you. So what actually brings up this topic? So I have a friend, an amazing friend. She's probably listening to this right now. And she told me it was okay to tell her story. And we actually just had a conversation a day or two ago. She was struggling. So she's traveling. She's not in her own space. And her home office is amazing. Like if you've ever watched any of her live streams or her videos or listened to her podcast, I love her studio setup. She always looks so comfortable in her home workspace. It's very much like her. Like it has that ambiance. Like when you're listening to her, you're like, oh, this is so her. And it is really important for her to have that environment to work. And so what she has been struggling with, like we had a conversation and she's like, Mindy, I have no place to work. She's like, it's a beautiful house. I'm doing some house sitting. I am, but there's people in and out of the house. Sometimes there's cat litter on the table. Mindy, help me. The Wi-Fi is not good. I can't really find a place. I don't really want to be stuck in the bedroom. The lighting isn't that great. So I'm either working outside and dealing with things falling on top of my laptop, or I just can't find a quiet space. And she said, Mindy, you know what? I really want to feel grateful because I'm happy to be where I am. Like physically, the environment is great. Like it's actually the place that she would prefer to live versus where her home is located. And geographically, it's fantastic. But the environment, the immediate environment is not conducive to being a digital CEO, which is what she is, to running her business, to consulting, to working with her clients, to doing her live streams, doing her podcast. It just doesn't make her feel that she's empowered, that she's in a place where she feels safe, where she can just kind of get into her work and do her thing without bothering other people. I mean, even things like using somebody else's fridge and not really having your space in the fridge. All of that kind of comes into play when you are out of your own workplace. So we talked through this and just really tried to figure out, okay, well, what can you do where you are now? Do you need to spend some more time at home, kind of go back to your home and your home office for a bit, before coming back, if you need to do some more house sitting, and what does that actually look like? And it was a really good conversation because it just reminded me of the power of having a really good workspace and creating that wherever you are, because if you don't have it, you cannot be effective. And it doesn't matter whether you are a remote worker and you're working from home, or sometimes you're half in the office, half at home. Wherever you do your work, it needs to feel good. And I feel like there's kind of some formulas that I've come up with over the years about what creates an ideal workspace. And I'm going to share some experiences that I've had and just I'll tell you about some interesting workspaces and what I have done to kind of deal with limitations, because I think that's where we get hung up a lot of times, whether we are in somebody else's space or we are trying to carve out a space and maybe we don't have a lot of space to work with, and somebody is telling us you need a whole room in your house for your office, and then you also need the studio setup that is ready to go. Like we see these elaborate offices or these, production centers, and we think, there's no way that I have that amount of space to dedicate but I really want to create a workspace that works for me. So we're going to talk through some of that today because this is a really important topic. And the more that we talk about it and have conversations, the more that we can learn from others. And I love seeing people's offices. I don't know about you, but when somebody actually takes me behind the scenes and kind of like shows you like, oh, this is how it's set up, you're often very surprised because what it looks like when they're on Zoom or on, a video call or doing a presentation or on a webinar is not really how it looks when you actually see their setup. You're like, oh my gosh, there's lights all over the place. You're using boxes to prop things up. Your space is not as big as I thought it was. So I feel like that's quite fun, to see the behind the scenes. And I probably will share some behind the scenes photos of my offices after this episode. So look for some stuff on the Instagrams and TikTok after you tune into this episode because I'll share some stuff. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of my own experiences with office spaces, and then we're going to get into the different factors that we should be thinking about when we are creating an ideal office space. All right, so one of my very first offices was in the basement on the north side of Chicago. So at the time, my mother-in-law at the time rented us the office space right below her. So literally my mother-in-law was living on top of us and could open the door and walk down the stairs. It was terrible. I would not recommend living beneath your mother-in-law and hearing all the noises upstairs. But that's where one of my first offices was. And I had this little nook in cranny. It was kind of like a closet that I turned into an office, in quotes. And it was really dark. There were not many windows. But what I did like about that space was that there was a door that I could shut. And it was tiny. And you could feel a little bit claustrophobic. But as long as I had enough light in there, just like unnatural light, just kind of bringing in some lights, it worked out okay. So that was one of my first office spaces. And I realized at that point, okay, wherever I go, I'm going to need an office because I'm always working from home. Even at this point in time, I was actually working a job and writing on the side. And so I didn't use that office space a ton. So it didn't have to be perfect. I wasn't recording videos at that point in time. So it was very, very bare bones, but it worked. And I think having that door to shut helped me a lot and keep the mother-in-law out. Then my next office. So we moved from that space and we moved to, from the basement, we moved to the third story of a flat, so that's what they call them in Chicago in Wilmette. And so I did not have a space. There was no space to shut the door. So I'm like, okay, I need an office here. Where am I going to put it? I need a door to shut. I literally must have a door to shut. So I actually put my office inside of the bathroom. So definitely not the most ideal space. And I had a sign that said writer in progress, working in progress, and I would shut the door. So, I'm sure my husband at the time was not really that happy about having to knock on the door just to use the restroom and kick me out while I was writing. But most of the time he was gone anyways. He was working a day job at this point and I was writing pretty much full time. I also started recording videos. So some of my very first videos were recorded in that bathroom, but nobody would know. Nobody could tell because of what I did with my background. I did some funny things with the background to make it work. But you know what? I liked having that door shut and I had to be really careful just to make sure that my devices stayed okay when a hot shower was happening in there. But it worked. You got to get creative sometimes when it comes to office spaces and figuring out the best place for you. Then from there, I lived in a couple of different studio settings. So I would pick a corner in the studio apartment for my office. And what I would do to try to make it feel like an office and segment it was I would play with the desk a little bit. And then I would also put up a whiteboard or sticky notes. I love Post-it notes, colored Post-it notes. Oh, the best things ever. Any storyboards because I was writing novels at the time. And I would put that around my office space just to give it that feel. Even if it was in the corner and it was in an open space, it gave it that feel that, okay, that's the office corner. So that seemed to work pretty well for me as well when I was in smaller spaces. And then I actually started moving into a role. So instead of working from home and doing some writing, I actually moved into an office for a short period of time before I became a full-time entrepreneur, and I worked in an agency. So we had 2 offices. So the first one was quite nice because we had like these nice dark corners, and we worked with a lot of developers and they liked it kind of dark, but it actually was really cozy, and it didn't have that feel of the open office. But then we moved to we were all excited. Let's get this brand new building, new open office. And the open office was terrible. It felt like we were just all lined up. There were 10 rows of just desk after desk after desk. It was so loud. It echoed in there. It was horrible. So I tried to work from home as much as possible, but I still was kind of forced to come into the office. And luckily that didn't last too long because I landed my dream job in San Francisco, at the time, my dream job. And I moved into another open office space, but at least this one was less people. So I think there were a total of 20-ish employees. So even though it was an open office, it wasn't so many people that it felt really crowded. But still, I tried to work from home as much as possible. I was pregnant at the time. So that kind of transitioned. We bought a house in Big Bear, in Hawaii, not Hawaii, in California. And we moved there. And so I had a mountain office. It was really, really cool. So we were in the mountains. If any of you are familiar, Big Bear is very close to LA, so you can kind of go up there and go skiing. That's where a lot of people go to vacation. And it was really cool. The mountain air was different, the scenery was different, but nature. So at that point, I had an entire room, because we had a relatively large house compared to what we're living in now, for sure. And it was really nice and spacious, and I could see outside, and you could even see, bears coming down the street sometimes. So it was really, really neat, and I really enjoyed that space. And it was a little too open though. I like the office just a little more cozy. The room was quite large for me, but it worked, and it was pretty good, I would say, especially with the lighting. And I recorded a lot of videos in there as well. And then I moved to Indiana, and we lived in a couple of different houses, but in each of the houses that we lived in there, I always had an office room. So in a room that was dedicated to my office space. And most of these were, it's Indiana. It's not the most beautiful view. You think of cornfields, you think of, trees, backyards, lots of grass to mow. So it was okay. But I also tried having my office in one of our bedrooms because it was so big. The bedroom was massive. So I put it in the corner of the bedroom. I would say the downside to that though is you really can't shut off work, because when you're trying to go to sleep and relax, you're staring at your computer that's sitting over there in the corner. So that's definitely a downside, but it worked. And I think just kind of segmenting, I tried it in a few different rooms in each of the houses just to figure out what space worked best. And I always felt better when there was a lot of light, when I had plenty of windows, and then when I could shut a door. So that's kind of been a theme. And then we moved to Hawaii, and it is completely different here. So the first place we lived in here, I had, it was a 2-bedroom condo, and there were, 3 kids, and it was tiny. It was, I think, 800 square feet or something like that. It might have been a little bit less than that. So it was very, very small. So there was no place for me to have a separate bedroom and have an office space. But what we did find in our master bedroom, so where we slept, there was actually a good corner in there. So we put the computer in there on a rolling desk. So we discovered this thing called a rolling desk, which is fantastic. I love to stand up, and when I'm working, I always do better standing, and I can kind of wiggle and move my feet around, kind of, move while I'm working. And so I have a standing desk, and I could kind of tilt it. So if I wanted the background, there was a beautiful open window, and it looked very tropical. So whenever I would do a video call, I would kind of, turn my screen to get the beautiful background. And it's wow, where are you? It looks so tropical. And it was a great conversation starter. So I had to choose the corner of the room. Now where we are now, many of you have probably seen some of my live streams. And guess where I am? I'm also in the corner of my bedroom. So we don't have a bunch of space like Hawaii. It's very, very tiny. And so people consider our house extremely large. They come in, they're wow, your house is so big. Now people from the mainland would come here and be wow, it's kind of tiny. The walls aren't constructed that great. They would look at it and probably think it's a little bit of a dumpy house, just because of it's It's kind of small. It's very beachy feeling, but I think it's really funny, just the contrast. If you live here, space is at a premium, and the way that they build houses here is a little bit different than the mainland U.S. But here, I actually do turn my desk so that people are looking out, our window and can see the mango tree and can see a surfboard. So I kind of have like a little setup, but I'm on a rolling desk, so it makes it really nice because during the day when I'm not on a call, I'm kind of facing a wall, but to the side, so to my left, I can actually look out and see the chickens and see the mango trees. There's plenty of breeze. I can shut the door and the kids don't come and bother me. There's a bathroom in here that the kids can't use. So I feel like I have my own space. Now the downside is I'm going to bed and I'm kind of like staring at my computer. So I try to unplug it, turn off all the lights, and it is kind of a mental thing that I have to go through, but you make do with your space and it is totally worth it. Like I'd much rather be here in my tiny bedroom office than back in Indiana or in Big Bear on a mountain somewhere, in a bigger space because the trade-off is worth it. It's so much better. I love the climate here. There are so many other things going for it. So it's really figuring out what your space is, what space do you have available, and what can you do with that space? Like looking at your entire living space and saying, okay, where's the best place for me to be? Where can I be? What equipment do I need? And what does that look like? I believe that everyone deserves a working space that helps them to do their best work. So it's really about thinking in terms of your ideal workspace and working with your limitations. And sometimes your limitations are a good thing. It's not always a bad thing to have those limitations. It actually prevents us from feeling the need to, get a separate office space, which increases our overhead as digital CEOs, or feel like, we have to have something just because somebody we admire has, whatever it is, like a fancy office or a fancy studio setup. It's all about what works for us. And you can be as individual and as quirky as you want when it comes to your workspace. Your workspace is your own. For example, when I am working during the day, yes, this is our bedroom. I share it with my partner, but I kick him out during the day. If I really want to be in here, if I'm doing a podcast like I'm doing right now, if I'm recording a live stream, he knows this is off limits. So it's kind of like we transform it during the day to be a working space. And then at night, it's like, okay, this is our space. And it's, where we gather and where we chill and where we relax. So if you are in tight quarters, that's kind of a way to do it, is just set working hours. I do not work on this computer at nighttime. Like once I close down for the day, in the mid-afternoon, late afternoon if it's a later day, and I go exercise, it's like, oh, okay. The bedroom now is a bedroom. It is no longer a working space. So sometimes you have to get creative like that and make it work for you. So consider okay, yeah, I may have a tight working space, but what can I do? I've also tried putting a blanket over the computer. So it's like I don't feel like the computer is staring at me at nighttime, but that felt a little awkward. I finally just got used to it. It's like, okay, once my hours of work are done, I'm on my iPad, so I use my iPad at night, which is if I have to do a little bit of work, it's a little more fluid. It doesn't feel as worky work as I would call it. It's not as intense. I can't do heavy lifting projects on it. So there's kind of a distinction in the workday. All right. So what should you consider when you are thinking about your ideal workspace? Here are some factors that you should consider when you are setting it up. First of all is noise. Like what type of noise do you like? Do you hate? What bothers you? For me, I love nature noises. I cannot stand city noises. And I know a lot of you are like, Mindy, I love the sound of bustling New York. I love Chicago. I like kind of hearing coffee shops and people driving by. And for some people, that really works well. Like all of that background noise is really rejuvenating, kind of gives them energy. So you have to think about what noise you like. For me, I like quiet. The quieter, the better, but I love nature noise. So if you were hearing this audio, I should say, I have a noise silencer. It's called crisp.ai. So if you're curious, and it keeps out all the sounds, the background sounds of roosters crowing, birds. Like if you actually called me on the phone versus listening to me on a podcast, you'd be like, Mindy, it sounds like you're in the middle of a jungle because of all the bird noises. So it's really thinking through what noises you like in the background and what is relaxing for you. Sometimes I will also put on headphones If I'm working on like a writing project, I really like certain soundtracks to help me get into the zone. If I'm scripting a live stream, I usually put on music too. So I'll put on noise canceling headphones or my AirPods. So, kind of matching the noise with the type of work that you're doing. I also, some of my quirks, you get to hear about them here. I love listening to surfing competitions. I might have mentioned that on the podcast before. I love them. Like, I want to watch from start to finish. I want to see every heat. I want to listen to all the drama. I don't even mind the lulls in between, catching waves. Like, I love all of that. So what I will do when there's a surfing competition on is I will just kind of play that in the background. And it actually helps me to focus, especially if I'm doing work that is a little bit more on the busy work side of things, or if I'm chopping a bazillion mangoes like I've been doing over the past few weeks. Having like a surfing competition or something that's kind of like white noise in the background is very soothing, and it's really odd. But I love the sound of these surfing commentators. Like the way that I recognize all of their voices. I feel like I just kind of get into a rhythm with listening to them comment on all the waves. There's only so many things that they can say to describe the snap or, that aerial maneuver, the alley-oop, all of these wonderful surfing terms. But that is really relaxing for me. So figure out what your quirks are and what you need. And everyone in my household knows this. They're like, okay, Mindy watches surf heats, like when she's working on stuff. If she's really serious, she'll put on her headphones. If she's kind of, approachable, it's probably surf heats, or she might be listening to a replay of a coaching call from one of her business communities. So it's really figuring out what type of noise helps you concentrate, helps you focus, or just make certain types of work enjoyable for you. So noise is a really, really big one. So pay attention to the noises and the sounds and what works for you. All right, next would be scenery. Now, some of you are like, scenery, like, why do you need scenery? Don't you just need your computer? No. Scenery matters a lot. So for me, obviously, I like nature. I mentioned that already with the noises, but I like to see trees. I need to see lots of green, lots of trees, lots of foliage. I really like that tropical feel. And even when I lived in those other places I was describing, I love seeing trees and nature. Like green is so relaxing for me. So if I can see green while I am working, it does help keep me calmer. Now, I also have images. You can't see them, but I have like images around my office and in my room that are of the ocean. So that is also very calming for me. Sometimes I'll just look at them. I like the blues, the teals. I really like the color of the ocean. I have some turtles on the wall too. So it's very, very relaxing for me to see ocean scenes, also lots of green. So think about what type of scenery you need. Now, I know people like my brother, for instance, he is like a developer coding, I don't know. He does all this techie work and he likes to be in the dark. Like, I'm like, are you like Batman or something? It's like in like a dark cave. He likes it really, really dim. And that's where he feels cozy and where he can really just do his best work. He likes to work at night. And so you really have to think about what type of scenery you enjoy and what helps you get your best work done. You don't want it to be distracting, but you also don't want it to feel like too stiff or formal. Like when I was sitting in, the open office setting at the agency, I hated it. It was like there were no windows. All I could see was like people working on screens, and it was really annoying and also just not the best scenery for me. So like I like to see nature and that really calms me down. Other people really enjoy coffee shops and like kind of seeing people, mingling around and, people talking, and that background scenery is really, really helpful for them. Some people like to go to the beach or go out into nature and take their devices and do work out there. I've even had some clients that like to like walk on treadmills. Some people like to take their calls on a walk. I've even heard people record podcasts while they're walking, which I always think sounds a little odd. So think about what type of scenery you need to do the type of work that you do best. All right, next would be a door to shut. So ideally, you want your space closed off if at all possible. So even if you can't shut a door, maybe you can set up dividers. Like I've used those, I forget what they're called, but those kind of room dividers that you could probably get at IKEA or someplace like that. And they kind of divide the room. So even if you are in like a place in New York City, I've lived there, and there is no space, like you have no spot at all in this tiny little room. If you can set up dividers, that can help to kind of shut out your space, even if they're just up temporarily while you're working. Just something to kind of signal that you are working and that you are not available to be interrupted. even if you are living by yourself, that's still really important. There's something about like shutting that door or just kind of saying, I'm working now, something that signals that you are starting your work. Next would be Wi-Fi and internet. Most of us need Wi-Fi and internet to do our work. Some of you may not, but many of us, especially digital nomads, digital entrepreneurs, people with an online business, consultants, remote workers, we all need Wi-Fi and internet to be in communication with the people that matter in our work. So having a strong connection is really important, and I will not move or live anywhere that does not have good Wi-Fi or internet. That's like a prerequisite to everything. It's like, can I hardwire in? Do you got fast internet? Do you got Ethernet? I need it all. Like, give me the works. I have to have great internet or I cannot do my work, especially because I do a lot of live streaming. I do a lot of video. I do a lot of calls. I do a lot of group programs, and you have to have good internet, and that's a non-negotiable for me. All right, next would be lighting. So lighting is really different. Like I mentioned, like some people like that dark feeling, especially if you like to do work at night. I like it bright. I like light walls. I like it very bright, tons of light, but I like natural light if at all possible. I don't like being in a dark space as of now. Like, it does not work for me. I feel very shut in. And so give me lots and lots of light. Now, I don't like a lot of unnatural light, and for those of you who are sensitive to blue light from screens, you may want to use something like Gunnars. It's Gunnar. They're like blue light blocking glasses, but you don't want to use them all day because you want to also keep in mind that you do want blue light at the beginning of the day. You don't want as much blue light as you are getting ready for bed. Now that's like a whole nother story about chronobiology and sleep rhythms and circadian rhythms and all that good stuff. But just kind of keep in mind, if computer screens do bother your eyes, I would get blue light blockers, just for when your eyes start getting tired, and that kind of helps with the light. So for me, lots of natural light. I put on all of my, studio lighting when I am doing a live stream, but obviously that stuff is not on during the day, and I don't really like light shining on me unless I'm on stage. So lighting is really, really important. Figure out what works for you. All right, smells. You're like, smells, Mindy, really? Yes, smells matter a lot. So right now, smells are top of mind for me because we keep it real here. We have a chicken who just died, which is very sad. And he's under the lanai, which is right outside my door where I am working right now. And so there was no way to get him because there's like a lattice and you can't get under there at all. So we have a dead chicken rotting right now, which is so sad and also very stinky. And so it does make it very hard to focus because when it's hot outside and the sun is shining on the lanai, all I can smell is that chicken. And yeah, so that's challenging. So smells are top of mind for me right now. Ideally, good smells. I love like the smell of, obviously we have a mango tree out there, so like that green smell, that really earthy smell. You can also, because we're so close to the ocean, it's right across the street, you can smell the ocean, and it just smells so good. And I love the smell of like fresh rain. So if I'm also wanting more of that smell factor, what I will do is I will pull out, I have a diffuser, so I will pull out the, or like aromatherapy, if you've ever done aromatherapy, and put in some different smells in there. So lavender is really calming, but gets me too sleepy during the day. So something that has kind of that minty smell, or lemon, or something that just kind of peps me up. I like eucalyptus as well. So doing some aromatherapy is quite nice, and it just kind of is like, gives you a little bit of a pep in your step as well. So smells matter a lot. If you are near something stinky or smelly, it is not going to make for a good work environment, even if everything else seems to be working. So smells matter. All right, size. So what size of the office do you need, or workspace? This varies because this is one of the biggest limitations many of us have. If you have a relatively big house or an extra room, you can just kind of set aside one of your rooms for an office, and that is ideal. Just because you can shut the door, and when the door is shut, nobody's going to come in, nobody's coming in there for other reasons. So you do have a separate office space. So as long as those other factors are working for you and you have a separate office, do it. Like, that's my biggest recommendation, is like always have a separate office if at all possible. Now, if you are limited with size, then again, you're just going to go with what you can manage. And it's also not a bad thing. Like my office literally is all on one rolling desk. And yes, there are other elements like lights and such that I pull in when I need to, but everything that I need to do my work fits on one rolling desk. And so I can roll this desk wherever it needs to go based on whether I'm recording or I'm just working. And I have a nice mat under my feet. We call it the happy mat because if you're feeling sad, you just stand on the happy mat or lay on the happy mat and you start feeling better. It's like this rainbow colored mat. It's very cute. And so I have my happy mat and I have my desk set up and everything I need is here. And I try to keep it very lean and mean. And that also ensures that I don't have a bunch of clutter. So thinking in terms of size, you don't really need a really big size office depending on what you do. Obviously, if you are like my grandma is she was a crafty lady. And so she had to have an entire room dedicated to her crafts because there's all of these other materials that you need to do your work. So if you're a digital nomad and most of your work is done, like you're a knowledge worker, most of it on a computer, you don't really need that much space, but you do need enough. So I have a desk and it also has some like a pull out, extender to make my desk bigger when I need an extra screen or extra space. And I'm lucky my partner is a carpenter, so he built me this desk, and it's really interesting. Like the top is actually from McDonald's. It used to be like a McDonald's countertop. So who knew that I would end up with a McDonald's countertop and legs from some old desk and then like this really cool like rolling contraption. Like he's very, very clever and creative, and yes, it is a really cool freaking desk, and I think they should sell them because they're awesome. So anyway, back to the size. Size doesn't matter as long as you can create a space that feels good for you and gives you enough space to do your work. All right, couple more. Standing versus sitting. This is a big one for me. I discovered I like standing. I cannot stand to sit. Okay. So I love standing. So I must be standing all day long, and I will actually have a lacrosse ball or something under my feet to kind of play with, because then it keeps my feet from, your calves get tight if you're standing all day long. Sometimes your hips can get tight. So it took me several weeks when I fully transitioned to standing all day. It took me some weeks to really adjust to that. My feet would get really sore. So I love standing, and I recommend it. If you have one of those treadmill desks, those are really cool too. If you want to walk, if you have the space for it. I don't like sitting. I don't do my best work sitting, but I know a lot of people who, as long as they have like their favorite comfy chair to sit in, they can crank out their work, and they're very happy as long as they're taking breaks to stand up every so often. So figure out what works for you. But if you've never tried standing, standing is amazing, and it just helps your brain work so much better. And you feel like even if you can't exercise all day long, it's like at least you can kind of wiggle and stand and move around, and it does keep you a little bit more fit, I would say. And it burns a few more calories than sitting. All right, now talking about equipment. What equipment do you need? So if you're an online person, a knowledge worker, most of you are probably going to need a good headset, a good microphone. You're going to need some lighting, probably a really good computer, probably 2 computers. You always need a backup or another device if one of them goes down. Probably a printer, scanner, those types of things, notebooks, pens, paper. So just kind of figuring out what you need to be successful. And like, when is the last time that you actually looked at your desk, at your office space and said, okay, that's clutter that I actually use, that I don't use anymore. Like, why is that still on my desk? That makes me happy. Like, I always have a few, like, trinket things that make me happy. Like, looking at my desk right now, I have a medallion from going through Seth Godin's Alt MBA from 2016 that has been on my desk since 2016, and I love seeing it. It's one of those happy things. You've also probably heard me, if you listen to some of the early episodes, talk about the dancing monkey. So I have a monkey bobblehead on my desk that dances when the sun comes on it. There are funny little things like that just make your desk fun. So think about the fun things, think about the practical things, but you want to avoid clutter at all costs. All right, and then apps. So when it comes, that's not exactly office space, but apps can really make your life easier. Like I said, if you live in a space that has a lot of background noise and you do a lot of calls or recordings or podcasts or, stuff that people can hear things happening in the background, or if you have kids at home, get Krisp, KRISP.ai to silence all of that background noise. And no, I do not have an affiliate link, but I just think that app is amazing. So think through the apps that make your life easier. There are certain things I couldn't live without, like Otter.ai, which transcribes every single meeting that I have. There are interesting things that you discover along the way. You're like, wow, how did I live without this? So as you are figuring out your workspace, also think about the apps that you can use that will address any of the trouble spots that you're having. Like, for example, for me and the roosters, that was a really big pain point, was people were saying, Mindy, like, I can hear all the background noise. I can't hear what you're saying. And for me, being somebody who creates a lot of digital content, that was a problem I had to solve. And it didn't require me to change my workspace. It just required an app to silence the roosters. So get creative. When you do come across a limitation, there might be an app that can help you solve it. All right, so I'm going to call it good there today. We talked a lot. I love office spaces. So I'm curious about you. Do you have a separate workspace? Do you like your workspace? Is there something that we talked about today that you could do to improve your workspace? I would love to hear or see, like, if you'd like to share pictures of your workspace with me, I would love to see your setup. You can find me on Instagram at Mango Effect Podcast, or on TikTok, Mango Effect Podcast. Let's encourage and inspire each other this week, and let's really get our workspaces working for us instead of against us. And if there is a follow-up that you want me to do on this, let me know, because there are so many other aspects. Like, I feel like we talk about one topic and it's like, ooh, we could talk about productivity. We could talk about all sorts of fun things on the show. So let me know if you have a suggestion. All right. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Mango Effect Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss an episode. And if you love the show, please write a 5-star review for the show if you're feeling it. That would be awesome, because we are trying to get more subscribers, and all of those reviews definitely help us as we grow. All right. I will talk with you all in the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye for now.